First item on the agenda, approval of minutes, beginning with the October 25th special meeting comprehensive plan workshop. Commissioner Fries.
I have passed out to my colleagues a proposed revision to the minutes on page 3. Basically, I simply indicate what I said at the meeting, which was that I wanted the ground rules to reflect that commissioners can offer amendments for consideration, that will allow commissioners to directly communicate with the consultant and also having the commissioners involved in the drafting of the comprehensive plan early in the process. So that was my one amendment to those minutes. And I make a motion to amend the minutes accordingly.
Is there a second for that motion? Any comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And on the question of the minutes as amended, is there a motion? And a second? Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next item, November 9, regular commission meeting. Is it, Commissioner Fries?
I also have an amendment to this, these minutes on the first page. I explained that my reasoning on the recreational marijuana aspects, I indicate that I explained that there were distance buffers in order to protect children, reduce their access and exposure to marijuana. I cited various studies and I argued for a cautious approach. So those are, I just want to have the minutes reflect the reasoning for my amendment. I make a motion to adopt my amendment.
Is there a second? Seconded, all in favor? Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? And finally, the December 5th regular commission meeting minutes. Commissioner Fries.
This is the last one again. It's on the first page. It's basically, I was explaining about a special use permit, how it could become a by right, that it could lead to litigation, and that a more cautious approach was to prohibit the use and have the applicant seek a use variance or some other type of zoning change. And I also noted that there are many residents within a short distance of areas zoned industrial. So that reflects the comments I made at the meeting, and I make a motion to amend, to adopt the amendment.
And is there a second? Motion's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And on the question of the minutes as they've been amended, is there a motion? And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Would we have the minutes please reflect the fact that I abstained from those votes as I was not at the meeting? Next up is the subdivision and land development regulations public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on these regulations? Is there anyone online who wishes to speak on these regulations?
I see no public comment.
Is there a motion to close the public hearing? And a second? All in favor? Jason, we're going to have a presentation or discussion? Okay.
Yes, I think that we can run through the regulations. And I think that you're the best one to run through this. I kind of gave it a shot at it last time. The document's 120 some odd pages. So we've seen it twice before, so I don't know how in detailed we want to get on this. You know, let's walk through it.
I'll leave that up to you guys. Maybe the best thing to do was before you get going, so you can focus, would be, does any of the commissioners, since we've seen this twice already, do any of the commissioners have specific questions that Ken or myself or Jason can answer, rather than Ken scrolling and then us, losing it, going back and forth, just to start off?
Just a quick, as I told the staff earlier today, I have 3 very minor amendments, and I've sent it to the staff, and I'll go through it when we get there. They're very minor things, and I know I spoke with Jason about it before Christmas.
Yeah, Kathleen?
It's not with regard to, the current draft. It's more of a, I guess, a legal question. We are adopting these because state law, to be consistent with changes in state law. If that state law was challenged and provisions of that state law were found to be unconstitutional, we would have adopted those as regulations, and they would still apply. Is that correct?
Well, we will adopt them, and if there's a court case challenging something, one of these, and it turns out to be unconstitutional, then obviously that would be void within our statute, and we'd have to rewrite it or decide it a different way. Nothing's been, well, obviously it was effective yesterday, so in my opinion, we don't have a choice but to adopt them, to follow state law. And if there are challenges in certain circumstances, we would have to wait for those challenges to be heard throughout the system. And that could take 2 to 5 years. So in the meantime, I can't guess on what's going to be unconstitutional or what's going to be challenged.
No, and I guess I should have been more clear, but I don't disagree that we need to adopt them. I guess what I'm asking is there some clause at the end that you sometimes find in legislation that would say something like, should any of the changes to these regulations be found to be unconstitutional, or if the law underlying those changes is found to be unconstitutional by a court of competent jurisdiction, then the corresponding provisions would be null and void, and it would revert to the previous ordinance.
I'm sorry, and that's been in there. Cover the current ones and then the changes. Yep.
Any other comments from the commission? Okay, Ken?
All right, so just to get back to your comment that the severability clause was not, it was an existing provision within the regulations. So I just wanted to, back up Solicitor Marsala on that. I thought of that immediately as you brought that up. So going back to our earlier, as you had remembered, I'm going to zoom out on this just a little bit, just so that we can kind of go back to what we were looking at. So as I had mentioned, I'm just going to zoom out just so we can get a broader picture. So anything, as you've seen, this was kind of a whole cloth reformatting for readability, but also, as I had mentioned, the green is only so that I could find, individual sections. Obviously, the green will be taken out when these are formally published. In addition, in the regulations, there's kind of the grayish kind of background highlighting. Those are the items that were changed. There were no changes, with the exception of Commissioner Frias's 3 suggestions, suggested edits that we got, and we can talk about those shortly. I'll jump to those after this overall discussion. But the individual changes, there was nothing changed from the previous time we saw this as a rough draft. to this document here. So essentially, we would go through if all of the suggested edits are approved, go through, we'll just essentially hit accept all. I would only just capitalize the scene commissioner just because that's a thing for me, but we would go through, we get rid of the highlighting, and then these would be then published. They'd be published on the webpage. I believe subregs, you also submit them to the Secretary of State, and then we would also have them available. We usually have like a desk reference in the office. And then we would forward these to our, I know Attorney Murray's here, we'd forward these to some of our frequent flyers in terms of developers, attorneys, representatives, surveyors. So with that in mind, just as a broad overview, I know, Mr. Coop, you weren't here before, I don't know how much you've read into this, but most of the changes, as they do, they reflect the changes in the state law. And so the major changes on here was essentially the elimination of the plating board in terms of appeals. Now appeals pretty much go directly to Superior Court with very few exceptions, and there's some question as to whether or not those are deliberate exemptions or if it was just a sort of a scrivener's error in terms of the function of that appealability. And just as a quick example, if they say the decision of administrative officer is appealable to Superior Court, is a decision by an administrative officer a certificate of incompleteness? So that's one of the questions that's owes to the relative to the ambiguity of how the legislation was written. The other major piece is a clear delineation of the definition of a land development project. Previously, it was relatively kind of left up to the local regulations to define those. They have those on here now. There are also changes to the thresholds for minor and major subdivisions and the manner in which those projects are reviewed. Minor subdivisions that do not require street extension or creation or any sort of zoning relief, they are reviewed and approved by the administrative officer. They're not administrative subdivisions, but it's the manner in which they're reviewed and approved have been changed. Those are reflected on here. The biggest formatting change is that now individual sections, so you'll have an individual section for administrative plans. Here's what's required, here's your time frame, here's your criteria, so forth and so on. Same thing for minor subdivisions, minor land development projects, major subdivisions, major land development projects. That was not the case before. Previously, it was, okay, if you're doing an administrative subdivision, here's your review criteria, but if you want to actually submit it, go to section 7, and you'll have a laundry list of items, but they weren't separated out by the actual project, so you had a lot of page flipping. I didn't like that, so we changed that so you could actually read it and figure out what you're looking for. We have a table of contents on here as well, so you can skip right to that page on there. There's also the provision for unified development review, which is essentially if any project, a subdivision or land development project comes in that requires any sort of zoning relief, it is then reviewed here by the commission rather than as it exists previously, where they would come in front of the commission, get a recommendation, go to zoning, get their zoning decision, come back in front of the commission for either prelim or final, depending on what type of project it was. Now the commission, you guys have the ability to review those projects, and you would still have the same timeframes as if you were acting as the zoning board. You have to make the same findings, you have to have the same timetable, so forth and so on. Those provisions are in here as well, your submission requirements and the clarification of what your findings are. Again, just goes references back to state law. If state law says, here are your findings, we then reference those findings directly through the statutes. Some of the functional changes that were made on here as well deal with.
Can I stop you? I just actually
Sorry.
have a procedural question, but everyone should, is the city going to create, or have we created I'll call it an application form for when that type of unified development comes in? This probably for the audience too.
Yeah, so as part of this, the application or the application and the applicable checklist are what are important. When I first started here back in 2012, 2013, we had started doing that. And then I believe Josh Berry had updated those. So as part of this, our checklists are actually relatively updated to what we use. And then we will have a new checklist for unified, which would, for the most part, look like have the same requirements for a zoning board application you would have your project narrative that describes, if you're looking for, if you're doing a dimensional variance, what are your required findings for that? Show us how show us how your project meets that, so forth and so on. And we will have those up. Those are currently online. They'll be updated, and they'll be available for applicants to have. So I'm going to go now. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to go to the individual changes that were made. Let me just kind of zoom in here so we can actually see it. So part of we have on here the first change, which is in red from Commissioner Frias, or at least this comes up as red on the drive here. So what we have is previously our webpage, for those of you who've been here forever, our webpage up until maybe 3 or 4 years ago was essentially obsolete and you couldn't use it. What we're doing now is we have the ability to post not just the agendas, but all the meeting materials, staff memos, minutes, agendas, plans, supporting documentation. The webpage is a little clunky to use. We're still figuring out, but we're in the process of doing that because we like the ability to have people look at plans, look at projects, look at materials, because we found through experience here, but also in my previous positions and roles, that when you have the capacity and the ability to put things online, it really alleviates a lot of the questions that people have when they come into meetings and like, oh, that's what it is. I didn't know that. So one of the changes on here was including, so anything that was red, there were no changes to this otherwise. So anything that's not red was already in the regulations, and the red is just the additional piece. So we're gonna have supporting materials will be emailed to the commission no later than 7 days rather than 5. So it kind of gives an extra 2 days for review. And it also includes a provision for a hard copy of any materials could be provided upon request. And I will let Director Pizzullo talk about that one only because he has a longer tenure here than I do. Thank you.
Jason, do you want to weigh in on that?
Ken, what did you want me to comment on?
I don't know if you had anything to, I don't know.
Well, there's no great way to present this a third time. We've looked at this document multiple times, so I'm more interested in if anybody has amendments to this document. It's been up, it's been live. We've looked at this. We've talked about these changes. So if it pleases the chair, if we could kind of go and listen to some of the proposed amendments,
Oh.
and then we can kind of wrap this thing up. It's just a bear to keep talking about it like this. It's 120 some odd pages.
So-
We get where we are on this.
Understood. Am I correct in understanding that this language represents a proposed amendment by Commissioner Frias?
That's correct.
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
So,
So.
do you want me to
so
explain?
Would you like to explain the rationale, please? Thanks.
Sure, no problem. So let me start out with what the language is right now. Languages right now is that these agendas are supposed to be mailed out to us by 7 days before a meeting. Okay, that's the regulation right now. And what I thought is, okay, instead of mailing it to us, I agree, it should be emailed. And I think 7 days before a meeting is adequate because, well, sometimes you have a lot of materials for a meeting and you spend like I sometimes will spend an entire Saturday or entire Sunday reading a whole bunch of paperwork. So if you give me 7 days, it gives me a little bit more time than 5. The second part of it is upon a request of a commissioner, it can ask for a hard copy. I've never in my 2 years asked for a hard copy from the staff for anything. I have a personal computer at home. I have a work computer, but there could be commissioners who have difficulty printing out large documents. So I thought it was a courtesy. We should always allow a commissioner to ask for a hard copy. Just on a background, these 3 minor amendments I'm suggesting, I emailed the plan director and the solicitor some questions. And then I met with the planning director before Christmas to go over some of these things. And this is what I think is a reasonable thing. Of course, all supporting materials, what I mean by that, of course, is the materials on the agenda that support the applications, whether they be traffic reports or what have you. So, the only thing that will be by 7 days rather than 5 days is that, the applicants will need to get their materials in a day or two earlier than they used to. The staff will have to get their materials in a day or two earlier. And, right now, as you all know, we sometimes don't get this stuff until 4 days before the meeting, do we know? So this is just to give us a little bit more time so we don't have to spend the whole weekend. So that was why I thought this was a simple administrative thing. Sorry for the length of time I spent talking about it.
And I guess my question to Jason or Ken is, or Greg, is do applicants submit supporting material in a format that will allow you to post it on the web? That's my only concern is I don't want, and Steve, I don't want the city to be obligated to post supporting material when it's submitted in a format. Say they come in with a Mylar that's can't shrink. I don't want it to be a violation of the rules when, or our rules, when something is not posted when it can't be posted. So
Okay.
let me, so how do they submit it?
Since I've started here and in all of my other positions, every applicant has been required to submit a
Everything
digital
electronically?
copy.
So you guys can
Anything you
just flip
give
it?
me in a physical, I want it as a digital as well. So when it's a plan, I don't want them to print it, then sign it, stamp it, then scan it back to me.
Yep.
They just send the actual like final PDF.
Okay,
and
so
things
it's
like
not a
that.
problem.
It is not, no.
Administrative.
And
Okay,
they have
perfect.
it. They've actually, most of the time, when we've gone through and have asked for digital copies of things prior to, we do like a review before you print everything.
Yep.
They actually prefer that the least amount of copies that they need to print and then review and then print and then do it. Everything that I get as a physical copy, I have a PDF of as well.
All right, thanks.
So the comment about moving the day back for getting everything posted to the website, we can do that. It's going to be an adjustment, means the agenda will close earlier. Applicants will have to have their supporting documents into us earlier. Certain items can be bumped because of this, but we'll have to adjust. It's something that we haven't done it like this, but we'll be able to do that. The paper copies, I have my reservations about that. Certain documents that come in are hundreds of pages, and to ask staff to say, well, yeah, I want this hard copy of hundreds of pages. It's, we have limitations in our budgets and everything else like that in terms of how much money we can spend on copying. So I'm hoping that the commission does not really take us up on that. In 2024, everything's available on the city's website. In just 3-4 years ago, the only thing that the commission ever got was the agenda and the memo. And that's it. Did not get the application, did not get the application materials, did not get supporting documents. Those were always referenced in the staff reports. Now everything is available online. And I think that, as far as transparency goes, we've done a pretty good job with that, but hard copies can get really cumbersome, very, very cumbersome. So I hope that nobody really asks us to take us up on that, because that would be problematic.
I'm just gonna make a quick comment, or two. Actually, the first one being the agenda and supporting materials shall be posted and shall be emailed. I think I would just want to make sure everyone agrees with me that an email with a link to the document online would suffice, and we don't need the actual document as an attachment. And my second comment would be, in the case of a very large document, and a commissioner feels the need to see it on paper rather than read it on a screen, I would think the city could handle that better than the individual commissioner could. So I think Tom could figure out a way to scrape together a few reams of paper if needed.
I'm hopeful that that's not going to be the case.
Actually, a good solution for that is, so we do have the great thing about the new webpage is that we are currently doing the document link, which is what I've done before. it makes it easier because there are limitations with the email, but also when it comes to the physical copies, what we can do is, memos are relatively short. But also, I do know for individual cases, if we see projects multiple times, ahead of time, that sort of thing. What we can do is if necessary, we can, if somebody knows of a particular piece of documentation or whatever they want, ahead of time, if we know that, we can have the applicant send us another one, or, typically we'll have maybe an extra copy or two in the office, but sometimes the applicant will be like, yeah, if you need anything, just, let us know. So if we get enough ahead of time, we can have the applicant, make those at their expense. I've done that before in my previous role as well.
I would just note that I'm in administrative law and I represent utilities in Massachusetts. If the commissioners need a hard copy, the applicant utility will provide hard copies to the department. So it's just a matter of asking. This is not a big deal. Like I said, I've been here for 2 years. I've never asked for one piece of paper to be printed. I'm just saying there could come a time. That's all it is.
So would it make sense to vote on each proposed amendment as we get to them so we can move forward?
Sure.
So,
I'm gonna stop you on that one. So why don't we go through the amendments? The public will then have to comment on the amendments because it's been amended, and then we can, if you want to vote on all three of them separately or whatever, or how many do we have?
Three
amendments.
And that was the one that had the most words.
Yes, so why don't
understood.
we,
So we will vote on all three as a block at the end.
yeah, but
Okay.
why don't we go through the amendments? We can open it up to public comment just for the amendments.
Understood.
We,
Okay. All right, this is on page 53, and this is very minor, but I asked the staff, Director Pizzulo, and I asked Steve Marcella. It said that the word was direct abutters. And based on Mr. Marcel sent me an email, said the better word would be radius abutters. And the reason is that direct can sometimes be interpreted as people who are literally adjacent to the property. Radius abutters would mean people within potentially 100 feet, 200 feet, 400 feet. So this is I consider it an extremely minor amendment. And it's just clarifying to make sure direct is not the same as radius. I don't know if anyone has any issues with it.
Mr. Chair, I actually just received an email from somebody saying that they cannot raise their hand and someone has a question. Is that somebody watching or? That came in about 15 minutes again. Trisha Gilmore.
So
The individual might not be able to be familiar with Zoom, and I did see a hand show up briefly, but it flashed for a second and I could not tell which person. So a reminder to the public, you only need to hit the raised hand button once and your hand will stay raised.
we can take that comment at the end, or we'll go through it again.
okay.
Okay.
Okay,
Commissioner Price, you're going to talk on that amendment? a
the
little more?
third one, the
On
last
the
one.
third amendment.
Okay.
Please.
This is on page 78. This is under the Unified Development section. On Cranston, we provide notice to abutters within 400 feet for zoning variances. State law says you have to give at least 200 feet. So I just thought, and I believe when I communicated with Solicitor Marcella, that because we're doing the zoning variance, a unified development also includes zoning variances. So because there's a zone variance component in a unified development, it should be like a zoning variance and have 400 feet. That's the only change. Instead of 200, 400. And that's to make it consistent with how we handle zoning variances today in Cranston.
Yeah, and agreed on that, because I don't know how this is gonna work, but I guess you could appeal, someone could deny, I guess the planning board could approve the planning application, but deny the zoning variance. It could happen. So, I think we would need to follow the rules under the zoning, because zoning variance, if that ever, practically, I don't see it happening, but it could, so.
And as I was gonna say, provides more notice to the public. I don't see what harm this is. And same type of notice they would get right now with zoning. So those are my three amendments, very minor. That's it.
Okay, so at this point, I would ask if the staff has any additional comments that need to be presented at this point.
We don't have any additional amendments at this point, and the 400 feet is acceptable. We had no real issue with that. It mirrors what we do for zoning right now, so. No, the draft is complete, so we didn't have anything else to offer.
So, Solicitor Marcella, would this be the time to reopen public hearing on the three amendments as discussed? So is there anyone present who'd like to discuss?
Good evening, Robert Murray, 21 Garden City Drive in Cranston. Not so much an objection on any of the proposed amendments. Just from practical experience, I wanted to share with the commission something the staff already knows. I have no problem submitting hard copies, digital copies. Been doing it for some time now. But from my experience, one of the challenges with large documents is the city's ability to accept an email from me with their bandwidth, or I just want to, from a practical point of view, just explain that happens quite frequently. So then you need to go back and like break down a document and send it, and make sure you send it in logical order. And so I just wanted to share that experience with the commission. But as far as submitting it digitally, and whether the supporting materials given to the commission through a link or an actual PDF, that doesn't really matter to me. But I just wanted to, one of the challenge with in this era of trying to be transparent and sharing as much information as possible, it's just from a practical experience, because then I have to go back to the traffic engineer who's given me a 400-page report with charts and pullouts, and have them break it down, or someone doing a stormwater report that's 300 pages with charts and everything. It's difficult, but we'll survive. But I just wanted to share that experience. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point, is there anyone online who's wishing to make a comment?
Account name Tricia.
Please proceed.
Hi there. Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. A few of us are on, and I know one of the collective questions was in understanding that the land use piece is in response to changes at the state level. One of the pieces we saw was the key highlights and information about smaller projects and how that will be approved at an administrative level. And I know it was briefly discussed earlier, but if we could just get some clarification on what that means. For example, would that mean if a small area is looking to be developed, anything under 9, I think was the number, if it was a zoning change, would that be done administratively? Would the same protocols be followed that have been followed in terms of public notice and those kind of things, or is that changing?
Mr. Chairman, if it's a zone change, as the Tricia just mentioned, that would follow the same process. That would have nothing to do with really the subdivision land development regulations. So that would follow the same process of notification, publication that the city council has to follow, but that's not a subdivision issue.
Two things. One is, Rob, if Tricia could just give her name and her address for the record, that's important. And then to answer her question, a zone change would go through the city council, and that really hasn't changed. If a minor subdivision needed zoning approval, that would then really kick it out of the administrative realm and move it into what's called now the unified development realm, which would then come into the public comment portion, because it would be before the planning board, because they'd be asking for multiple forms of relief.
Okay, great. Yep, my name is Trisha Gilmore. My husband Michael and I live at 4 Peppermill Lane.
Oh, thank you.
Yep, thank you for answering my question. That was really one of the major concerns. And then I think earlier you were they were mentioning about how the planning board would then be able to, difference in the approvals, and that's really what we were just looking to get a little bit more clarification on. So thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone else who online who wishes to make public comment?
I see no one, Mr. Chairman.
In that case, I'd take a motion to close public comment on the amendments. Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so the public comment is closed. I would ask for a motion to accept the 3 amendments as proposed. Commissioner Frias, second. Commissioner Zadelis, all in favor? Any opposed? And is there a motion to approve the modified subdivision and land development regulations as amended? Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Regulations are approved. Next up is election of officers. There's been a suggestion that perhaps we table this until next month's meeting when our president can be present to accept the nomination. If someone would like to motion to table, or if there's a motion
I'll motion a table.
until the next meeting.
Sure.
Is
I
there
mean,
a second?
in February?
Yes, to the regular meeting. I'm sorry,
Right,
to the
yeah.
next regular meeting,
In February.
February 6th.
Okay, that sounds cool.
Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed? Planning Director's report.
Not much to report this month. This month we will be working on hiring if we get lucky. So we'll be starting the process of interviewing for planner tech probably in the next week and a half. Senior planner, we sent that everywhere. One response. So I'm very disappointed in that. That's really not enough to have a hiring process. So we're gonna have to try again on that. Staff's gonna be working with consultant, bringing these first elements to the commission. Hopefully we'll have something for the board very soon on that. And the only other thing we had is January 24th is our big public meeting with the consultant and the public. It's going to be at the senior center. So this is going to be one of the few opportunities for the public to really get some input into this phase 1 of the comp plan update. So we hope to see you all there at the senior center and then on the following Tuesday. But beyond that, that's all I have to talk about right now.
Commissioner Zadelis.
In terms of the January 24th meeting, how are we getting notice out to the public?
We're going to be using social media is the in the website. I don't believe we have money in the budget for direct mailers, and that's just not going to happen. But we'll lean on the mayor's Facebook and the city councilors and trying to blast it out as much as we can, as well as probably a couple ads in the Herald. But yes, that's this month. It's always a matter of you do it too soon, people forget, not soon enough, it's too late. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll be blasting that out there.
Any other comments, questions? Yes. Commissioner Lanfear.
Director Pizzullo, can you give us any more detail on the comprehensive plan in the sense of what what sections are being worked on? Will we receive any drafts before the meeting on the 24th? And sort of what we should expect to receive in the upcoming weeks?
So the January 24th meeting is not intended to be reviewing the elements, the element drafts. That meeting is to listen to the public and for the public to give input on where they think the community is. As far as the elements that are coming to us first, the energy element, I believe it was natural cultural resources, historic preservation, and then possibly all hazards, but I'm not quite sure. Those are sections that, you know, we've done update work on them previously. We've had a consultant work on the historic preservation element. We just approved the hazard mitigation plan through FEMA last year, actually this year, well, last year. So that's pretty up to date. Those are going to be probably the first ones that staff has a chance to work on and then get those out to the commissioners. But they're going to be coming fairly soon. We haven't gotten those other drafts other than the energy draft.
Any other comments or questions for the director? Okay, so we've discussed the upcoming special meeting on the comprehensive plan. And as we stated earlier, the next regular meeting is Tuesday, February 6th. That's the end of the business. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor?